This is a revision note for Lecture 7, the Philips curve. First, I will show you how to derive the Philips curve from the aggregate supply and aggregate demand relation. Let's assume that an economy is in equilibrium. Look at this aggregate supply, aggregate demand graph. So we have GDP and price level, the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and the economy is in equilibrium point A with GDP QY and price level PLE. And then, of course, to make things easier, on the right hand side we draw unemployment and the inflation space. Now here, because we want to derive the Philips curve, so we have the framework first, and then we'll show you how do you derive this. At the moment, when the economy is in equilibrium, in the equilibrium point, in this unemployment inflation space is at this point A. So you have inflation here. Now let's assume that for some reason, for example, a housing bubble or an increase of consumer confidence, the aggregate demand curve shifted to the right to become AD prime. At this point, we know that the output increased to QY prime and the price increased to PLE prime. And what happens in this unemployment inflation framework? We know that the price is now higher, so inflation increased, and unemployment decreased. Okay, so we say this is point B. Now, let's assume that for some other reasons, this aggregate demand curve shifted to the left for a reduction of consumer confidence, etc. So let's say this is point C. And what happens on this framework is that you have, as you can see from here, the lower price level, but high unemployment. This is C. This is how we define the Philips curve. So the Philips curve is downward sloping, and the unemployment and inflation are negatively related. So now let's look at what happens when aggregate supply curve changes. Now look at this graph. That aggregate supply curve changed from AS to AS prime, with the price level higher than before and output level lower than before. What happens to this in this framework is that inflation now is higher than original one, and unemployment also changes. Aggregate supply shifts to the left, and we have inflation, higher price level, and low output level. Higher price level and low output level mean higher unemployment, means the Philips curve has shifted to the right. Higher inflation and more unemployment. So now let's summarize. With aggregate demand shift, there will be the movement along the Philips curve, but when aggregate supply shifts, the entire short-run Philips curve will shift.